Thank you, everyone. My name is Samad Masood, and I am the head of the Knowledge Institute for Europe at Infosys. And I have some of my colleagues and competitors here, frenemies, I think we can call them, as well as all partners in reality. I've asked everyone to kind of spread out a bit. I hope, Mr. Soundman, yes, the microphones are all right, you're over there, because I'd like us to kind of create a bit of a debate and a bit of a argument. So I'll start off by introducing each of them very, very quickly. So we have first Avnish Sabrawal from Accenture, involved in the ventures and open innovation space. We have Bikash Mathur from Cognizant Technology Solutions, and we have Sachin Devdugal from Engineer.ai, and finally Nick Chrysos from Cisco, who's Director of Innovation there. Our topic is to talk about the fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4.0, and basically the future technologies that are coming just around the corner, and what they really mean for technology service providers and technology businesses in the future. And I think this panel is going to have a great set of views to give. I'll kick us off just with a quick round of help us on a level set. Avnish, can you tell us what you consider to be the big challenges coming up in the Industry 4.0 era?
Yeah, sure, Saman. The first challenge, or the big challenge which we feel is that, when we talk about Industrial 4.0 or fourth industrial revolution, we immediately get into a set of technologies. And in our experience, it's actually for an organization and for individual, it's a big mindset shift. It's a different way of an organization thinking how to solve an old problem. Technology is an enabler, but we have seen that we get into the technology and different jargons in terms of AI, ML, blockchain, quantum computing very quickly. So I think that's one of the big challenges, that technology is not the starting point in the fourth industrial revolution. But having said that, the combinatorial impact of these technologies is creating and giving us an unprecedented opportunity for us to solve some very hard problems, especially in areas like education and healthcare, and also have inclusiveness and diversity built around this. So I think from our perspective, we see this as a great opportunity. Almost about 12 trillion of value can be unlocked by the combinatorial impact of these technologies. From an Accenture perspective, in terms of what these technologies are, we started off with a set of technologies called IMAX, which is interactive mobility, analytics, cloud, and cybersecurity. And now we are looking into a set of technologies, what we call DARK, which is distributed ledger, artificial intelligence, mixed reality, and quantum computing. So a mixture and a combinatorial impact of these technologies is why we are very excited about.
Can you share those acronyms there? I don't think I quite got that last one. But thank you, Avnish. It's very interesting. Because can you tell us your view and perspective? Because obviously technologies and the social impact of the combinatorial effect of all of these technologies, a great way to introduce it, Avnish. What could you add to that, and where do you see the challenges for us?
So I think from our perspective at Cognizant, what we've kind of begun to focus on is, in this new fourth industrial revolution, is how can we get the gig economy jump-started, right? So for us, it's all about getting the FANGs to today the FANGs are big, but tomorrow, and we believe in the fourth industrial revolution, there'll be smaller companies that will disrupt them. Just like at one time Toyota disrupted General Motors' dominance, just like you had Canon go after Xerox market share, you'll have the same thing happening in the fourth industrial revolution. That'll be driven by all the technologies that we all are familiar with. But more importantly, I think because of technology in the fourth revolution, you will have low barriers to entry into any business that you want to get into. And I think that's where my mindset is right now.
And that could create a big sea change, I suppose, in the types of businesses that are accessing technology. Sachin, could you tell us a bit about your view? A couple of themes there I'm sure you can pick up on, but what do you think are the biggest challenges for Industry 4.0?
So as we've seen sort of every industrial revolution, we've seen a reclassification of business. The last one, we had this divide between digital and traditional. You were either digital, you were traditional. Digital and became tech or tech-powered. I think the first thing to sort of look at the fourth industrial revolution is to redefine what the categories of business are. And so at least at Engineer.ai, and I share this with some of my peers, we redefine today's sort of modern day business as either tech companies, where the core product is technology, software first, where without software there is no competitive advantage, software powered, software is not the competitive advantage, but if you don't have it, it's a detractor, or if it's bad, it's even worse. And then a very large bottom of the fourth line of the pyramid, which is digitally yet to be relevant. And as we think about what the next sort of 10, 15 years is going to tell us is that in all of these four sectors, you have a ton of people that are fighting the fear of irrelevance. And so they're coming up with ideas. But they no longer want to be shackled by having to deal with centralized IT, or in the case of the category 3s and 4s, not having any IT. And so they all want to be building software to stay relevant and sort of pushing the needle. And so what you're going to see in the fourth revolution is not only new technologies that are coming, but the creators of these technologies and the consumers of these technologies are not going to be the companies that existed for the last 20, 30 decades. And I would go as far as saying the people building these technologies are also not going to be the ones that have been building it for the last 20, 30 years. I think there's going to be a fundamental shift in how the pyramid in the world works.
Great, thanks. It sounds like a big world of opportunity. The net positive, there's just net going to be more people using technology, and that's all good for all of us who make money from that. But Nick, I know you have some challenges, and tell us a bit about your thoughts about where we're going, and obviously Cisco's role in that is quite important as well.
Well, when we look into all these different technologies, from IoT we mentioned AI or all these, AR, VR. We believe that they all have a kind of a common denominator. They all really depend on this very reliable and secure kind of connectivity that you can bring them all together. What we just talked about a platform where everything is connected, that's going to allow people to put all the intelligence on top, to really try to make this software that is going to be able to control and make everything happen. For this to exist, we believe that you need to have a very critical infrastructure. And that's why we really stand from the point that our job is to connect the unconnected. Our job is to create this infrastructure that is going to drive this opportunity in the future. We already have about 85% of all the networks in the world, and we believe that it's not only an opportunity, but it's almost like our duty to make it happen. One thing that I see as one of the biggest challenges at the moment in the whole kind of evolution of this kind of technology the last 5 to 10 years is commercialization of the technology, is commercial models. We have been innovating like crazy with amazing ideas on the technology side, but still the procurement models, still the commercial models are very, very old, very slow. They don't adopt. We've seen thousands of smart city projects. None of them has been implemented into a real smart city because nobody knows how to buy it. We are creating these amazing ideas, but we're not really matching them with amazing also commercial models that will enable people to understand what they're buying, to take the risk away, and to really move forward to adopt the technology.
And I think that's a key point, isn't it? Because so much of what we're saying now is there's going to be this great opportunity. It's going to come from a different type of, whether it's gig economy startups or smaller SMBs and such. But really, the small and large working together on technology in an innovative way, I'm not sure that's really been proven successful yet. And I'd love to hear.
Yeah, there's a couple of points here. One, which is how do you commercialize a lot of this? The other is, what are the business model changes that you as a company want to drive? And I'm not talking about tech companies, I'm talking about real businesses out there in the real world. They need to change and pivot their business models to be more akin to what consumers are buying, or what consumers are willing to pay for. While we've got a problem with Cisco having put up the infrastructure and they need to monetize it, I think the challenge for them and for others is to figure out what business models are you going to drive in the future, where consumers can be pay as you go, they can be less capex, more opex, those kinds of things. And I think that's the difference between, in my mind at least.
Yeah, and part of that I think is you could call it innovation at the edge, being closer to the customer, being in different.
Exactly.
And what do you think incumbent technology businesses, which we all represent to a certain extent, apart from Sachin, and you can tell because he's wearing a T-shirt, and I think it's got a picture on it. I don't know what it is, but anyway, he's definitely not one of us. But what can we do to try and do more of that, Bikash? Because I think that's an important point. Understanding the customer, being driven by that, it's a complete mind shift in the way businesses build and industries work.
I think we have to simplify the way we do things. And we were talking outside just before this that we have contracts today, procurement contracts in financial services, banks that are clients of mine, which run into like hundreds of pages. And you have teams and batteries of lawyers working to sign off a contract. It takes 9 months to get a contract signed. To get a technology deployed, it could take you a year. Is that something that Sachin would even wait for? Would he even think about it? I mean, he would not think about it. Why can't we just have I said one-page contract, somebody else suggested an app, right? And that's really the kind of things we're talking about. Commercial contracts are the same way, right? We charge by hours, we charge by, lawyers charge by minutes. We try to charge by months. I mean, look, some of the stuff that we're going to be building in the future is going to be so low code, so highly automated, that you won't know the difference between humans and what they're paying for and the cost of technology, which is developing code, right? So I think the whole world is going to be very, very different.
There's a couple of things. Yeah, go ahead, please.
So I think, the other thing to keep in mind is we've gone through each of the industrial revolutions. We've moved from a bunch of generalists to a bunch of specialists. And Vikash is going to kill me from this. We've moved from a bunch of cottage industries to industrial processes. And unfortunately, software is the last cottage industry. And every industry still maintains its cottage precedents, right? Pagani still makes cars manually. It's the same 4 people that make the soup to nuts of the car, but the car costs $2 million. I think we're just blanketing technology and sort of the future, but we have to go back to where the demand's coming from. And the demand is not tolerant to cottage industry. The demand is tolerant towards predictable pricing, predictable delivery, low cost, removed human wastage, efficiency. The demand is coming in and saying, I need specialists that I can get for a day, an hour, a week. I don't need the 12 weeks it takes to start a project.
When you say cottage industry, I think what you're saying, it's almost like an elite. It's not a cottage industry. It's not the sort of thing your grandmother could do. It's something that's only accessible to the largest firms with the biggest pockets.
If I was
what you
really
mean?
Controversial, I would say it's akin to making jewelry in Jaipur, right? You have people like Dior and stuff that use an industrial process to build it, and it's mass market. And then you have like the high value, sophisticated 4 or 5 people sitting together for the life of a project. I don't think one will not exist and one will exist, but you have to see that the shape of the demand is changing. Like in 2017, $460 billion was spent by enterprises building bespoke software. $580 billion was spent by small, medium businesses. That small business bracket is growing so fast that you have to, when you think about the fourth revolution, you have to realize that these old and new worlds will coexist but not commingle. And what you'll see is the bottom of the pyramid, or the people supplying to the bottom of the pyramid, will move their way up to innovation at the edge. In some places, and we partner with many people on this table, where we sort of coexist even in an enterprise, but we coexist but don't commingle.
And I think for us, and I'll let Avi jump in on this because I'm sure he's got a great perspective, but for us, our focus has changed. 5 years ago, we had so much IP in-house, we had so much tooling that we were developing, and we were trying to monetize, commercialize. But we've now decided it's better to work with people who are on the edge of innovation, who are outside of the firm, because, free thinkers like Sachin, who can bring in new ideas and change the game and change the business model, right, for our clients and for us. So, I'm sort of not trying to agree with him, but I am agreeing with him.
I can't tell if you guys friends or hate each other, but either way, it's good. It's all good.
Yeah, because of the whole Jaipur analogy, I'm going to say that Amir's moved to making athletic leisure goods, right? I mean, we could do that. I mean, we could move from being, a cottage to doing that. But I think that'll happen if as we're doing, we're changing our focus away from innovation inside.
What does it mean for the sort of skills that are involved across, because particularly the event today, thinking about the connections between the UK and India, thinking about the historical revolution we've been through in the last 10 to 20 years around providing technology services and the massive role that India and its skills have had to play there. How is that going to change in this world, given what we're saying? Avnish, any thoughts on that? Or?
Well, I think the key skill which we are talking about is innovation, right? I think organizations are wanting to innovate. The interesting thing is that big organizations want to act like startups, and startups want to be like big operations, right? So, but why?
But secretly, they both hate each other. I found
well,
they're always bad-mouthing each other. Yeah.
I think the interesting thing which we have witnessed in our set of clients is that the reason why a lot of innovation is not working in big organizations is that they are unable to address some kind of polarities which we see in innovation. For example, when you talk about innovation, one of the things is that you have to be tolerant to failure, right? You need to show tolerance to failure. But organizations don't know whether they are tolerant to failure or tolerant to mediocrity, right? They don't know that, right? Similarly, when we talk about taking risk, that you have to take more risk, you don't know whether you are taking risk but also in a more disciplined manner. The other one is talked about from a startup perspective is agility. You want to be a big agile organization, but are you sacrificing delivering excellence? So if you look at all these, these are from one side of the continuum to the other side, and the big organization either go from one to the other or the other to this place. And this skill about managing dual thoughts and dual models in your mind and still retaining your sanity is something which organizations are not able to do. So I guess that's a big thing which we see.
From our side, I have to say, it's not the one or the other. We in Cisco we're 75,000 people. We've been seen as a kind of a technology giant, slow like a tanker. We start as a startup, and we like to think that we are actually acting as a startup. We have acquired more than 200 companies in the last 30 years, and the merging and the kind of keeping the culture running has been a major part of what we're doing. In our innovation strategy, we have everything. We have the internal investment R&D. We spend more than $6 billion a year on internal R&D, which, by the way, more than 80% failure. Just to bring it up there, and we do use failure as a measurement of innovation. Are we innovating enough? We invest with others, but also we decided the last 5 years to create this kind of co-innovation centers. We have 12 centers around the world that they act like landing pads. They are based on the assumption that the next big idea will not be created in Silicon Valley. It will not be created in San Jose, and we need to be partners. We need to be part of this element.
I think I'm gonna pick up on this failure thing. Because I think it's amazing that Cisco spends. That's a lot of money. That's the revenue of some of the businesses here, right? And but the fact that it's all being failed. And your point, Avnish, about failure and risk. The problem with a lot of established corporates is when they talk about failure and risk, they talk about it, and then when you actually explain that maybe this will hit their brand, or that they might lose some money, suddenly conversation stops. And it comes back a bit to that commercial models we started off with. Are we ever going to find a way to make it feel safe but actually still take risks? Because I think that's a fundamental challenge, really, isn't it? That innovation at the edges works because the people at the edge can see a revenue uptick if they do something quickly. But overall, changing a large organization or an industry is difficult.
I think one of the great examples is Cambridge and stuff that's happening in biotech, right? You've got all these big pharma companies, GSKs and Pfizer, et cetera. What they've done is they've actually taken some of their stuff that they were innovating on, but they couldn't bring it to market because of commercial reasons, because of risk of failure, or what have you. And they spun them off into companies. They actually put them into an incubator, put them into a Cambridge sort of area, and all they did was provide a bit of seed funding, and they let innovators come in and take those drugs to market because there's a long process, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a great example of how at least the health and the biotech industry is really adapting And those things will, because it's a lot easier for those innovators to try and get to that success and do the clinical trials and move faster with the FDAs and the regulators, I think it's a lot faster than for a GSK because of just their inherent sort of momentum, right? And the inherent.
I'd just like to add a point here that, as we are discussing, all the people here, big organization, they all have right intent. They all want to work with more disruptive, deep tech kind of startups. But a lot of it is also driven through what I call FOMO, fear of missing out, right? And there is this branding and marketing which they want to show to the world that they are also working with startups. And when we talk about corporate accelerators, as is being talked about, I call it a corporate, or a startup zoo, where you have 4 or 5 startups sitting in a room and people come and pet them, every day.
Hey, Avnish, I've run some of those things. I
know that.
I'm
right?
taking offense to this.
So I think, and if you look at what they do there, they do POCs, most of them free. The big corporate is asking the small startup to do a free POC. Yeah. And when the POC finishes, because these corporate accelerators are run by innovation teams, innovation people have good intent but no money. So after some time, they will tell the startup to go. So it's a complete value destruction for both the corporate and the startup to finish at a POC level. So I think, real value happens after that when you deploy a startup innovation at scale in a big corporation. Yeah. But I think that's still rare.
I think this is great. I'm going to stop here because I'm getting very offended.
But I think it goes back to the commingling piece, right? I think coexistence and commingling. Coexistence is that ultimately a startup needs to be able to address a client need by itself and not have a giant sitting in front of it.
Yeah.
I think there's a second piece of sort of the risk of failure. You only have to look at the stats, whether it was a famous Gartner stat that 51% of all enterprise software developments failed, or the standout report from 2017 that 78% of all SMB software deployment projects failed. That your biggest fear of failure is people just don't know how to build the damn thing.
Yeah.
And this goes back to a lack of an industrial process. And so when you think about how that impacts the future of work, by bringing in an industrial process, you remove generalists and you bring in specialists. How does that impact India? Well, for one, we've got a bunch of generalists that have to be retooled, reskinned, and retrained to become specialists. Everyone talks about AI, and it really just sort of boils my blood, because actually when you think about it, there's 5 million people that have advanced knowledge of statistics and can do CS. There's about 2 million of people that have written any sort of form of algorithm and can do CS. There's about 500,000 people that have written any sort of regression model in production use and can do CS. There's about 50,000 people that have done any applied AI and can do CS. There's about 1,000 experts in the world. Yet every single man and his dog talks about being an AI. And they don't even have the data. So the fear of failure is a fear of deployment as well. And the problem is when big companies are touting you should do AI, people don't even need it yet. Forget the governance. I mean, that's like a problem 10 years away.
Yeah.
Well, half of the time they are doing robotic process automation and they're calling that AI.
Yeah. So, but I think there is a sort of, over that 10 years to get there, we need to go on that journey, don't we? Because people are going to start to become specialists. And I think if we look at, again, back to the UK and India as an example, given the topic of today, and think not only about what one country can give the other in terms of its skill set, but also flip it the other way around, because there's been some amazing innovations happening in the Indian market, for the Indian market, where skills are being developed and knowledge is being developed that can then feed back into the UK.
I'd be really contrarian. I say like what's happening in India is incremental. What's potentially happening here is evolutionary.
Evolutionary or revolutionary?
Evolutionary. Okay. So it's in order of magnitude faster. And you have to just look at that by the density of research versus applied AI talent. Because if that's the future, right, you've really got 2 or 3 technology bases that are the future. High math, blockchain, India will do well. Visualization or computer vision or MR, AR, or whatever we end up calling it, and AI, really very similar skill sets. And you just don't have the applied knowledge, or it's not in the tooling or in the schooling or in the training process. And it's not like you can go to a Coursera course and suddenly you've done the Andrew NG course for 12 courses and now you're an AI expert. And unfortunately, until we realize that, there's going to be a massive imbalance of what India does and what the UK does. India will be great for tagging data, which is what it's being used for right now. All the AI centers that exist for the big companies, it's for tagging and categorizing data. It is not for writing models. Models are still being written on the West Coast or in London.
I think to be honest, things are changing in India. It's not that what is being said is that it used to be that is how India has evolved over time, and we started off being actually more of a B2C kind of a nation where we copied Western models, and then we had huge unicorns like Flipkart. But if you look at the last couple of years, the greater growth has been more in B2B and in B2B in deep tech. So I think while the fact is, yes, we are still not there, and we're not there to who can make a Google or a Mobileye, but things have started to change, and I can see the change happening. The most promising thing for me is that the Indian corporates have started opening up their wallets for investing in deep tech startups. This was not happening earlier at all. So now if you look at, for example, Reliance have done about 17 investments and acquisitions in deep tech. Similarly, big industrial conglomerates are doing that. If they are doing that, it means that the quality of deep tech has improved, and it will improve with all the initiatives with the government and the ecosystem is taking. But yeah, it is going to take time. It is not going to happen overnight. We have started off as a B2C nation, and it is evolving.
So, in terms of our wrapping up at the final points, we've had a really stimulating discussion. I'm not sure I'm much clearer in terms of a direction, so I'd like each of you to give me and the audience one key thing that you think business needs to do in order to keep up with the revolution that's coming, however slow or fast. And I very much appreciate you all being very, very pragmatic about where we really are in that growth, but I can see some of you thinking, I don't know which one I'll go with, but Sachin likes to talk, so I think maybe we'll go with him first.
So I think really for businesses, whether you're in that category 1 or category 4, in sort of how we define your interfacing with software, it's really going to be about decentralizing who comes up with ideas and who can build the ideas. See, in small companies, that's obvious. It's already decentralized. Everyone is allowed to come up with ideas, and it's a small group. In big companies, that's so important for them to stay relevant. And it's not about innovation, because innovation cannot have a framework or a process around it. By default, that hinders it. I think the second is there's going to be a huge change in skill set requirement over the next 10 years. And you've got to invest in specialists that are able to really go deep into a specific area and not generalists that can jump around.
Great. You used up 2 options there, so you need to apologize to the rest of the panel. You've just used up. Who would like to go next?
I can maybe follow that. I have to say, you have to be very authentic from both sides. And what I mean about this is that the partnership between maybe the large corporates with the small, agile, very fast thinkers is necessary. The scalability or the adoption of the technology from a brilliant idea is not only about having the having the specialist or having the right people behind it. It's about having also the structure and the process to be able to make it. And I think from both sides is this partnership that it will make it a reality.
Now, I'm going to stop us on this because, Sachin, you're saying particularly that there shouldn't be a process around innovation. And Nick, you're saying, and I respect you both. I'd like to just bottom out what exactly. Are you both saying the same thing?
I don't think so. I have an example. I mean, I could go into a more specific detail to make it there. We had a brilliant company 3 years ago. 3 people, not more than that they came up with an amazing idea for a retail solution. An amazing idea that one of our largest customers, a Scandinavian furniture manufacturer that could deploy this everywhere in their shops around the world. They loved it. They thought it was the best thing that I've heard the last 20 years. Yeah. And they could not really get it. They could not get it because they could not buy from 3 people and a dog. They need 24/7 covers. They need to be delivered, to be supported. Yeah. They need something that comes with a big structure behind it.
I understand. I think that's different from what Sachin's been saying around a process structure around how to do innovation. Thank you very much. I can't imagine who that retailer was, but Bikash or Avnish, would you like to go next?
I can go next. I think let me address this in the context of India and the question you're asking. And let me just say that. In India, if you are a retailer or you're an agricultural company or you're in healthcare, I think you need to focus on your core competency. You need to focus on getting to the consumer, getting to distribution points, whether it's medical supplies or medicines or seeds or indeed toothpaste. And I think if you focus on your core competencies and you let the ecosystem around you, the innovation, evolve, whether it's through the UK corridor or indeed the Silicon Valley India corridor, I think you can leverage a lot of that to make progress. And I think that's what I would conclude.
Thank you so much. Avnish.
Yeah, I'll still again, like to reiterate that it is more about the mindset change of an organization, and technology is an enabler. I think that's the most important thing which we need to take away. And if you look at a simple a 2x2 matrix where you have old problems and new problems, and old ways of solving and new ways of solving, I think that technology is helping us solve old and new problems in a very different way, right? And that's where the real value creation is happening. So if you can use the combinatorial impact of these exponential or frontier technologies to solve old problems and new problems in a different way, that is where value creation will happen. But you still need to be very, very relevant to your customer. I think that's something which we haven't emphasized yet.
Yeah.
But
Ambiguous
relevance to the
resilience,
customer will always stay. It's not going to go out of fashion.
Thank you. So in summary, decentralize, focus on skills, build a structure to scale, focus on the customer, and change your mindset. I love the going back to solve old problems with new technologies. Thank you. You guys have been brilliant. It's been a great discussion, very rushed. And guys, if we can have a round of applause, please.